No one who is HIV positive knelt down and asked God to be positive.
If you have a spouse, can you account for the 8 hours that she or he is away from you?
The first HIV case in Kenya was diagnosed in 1984. Decades later, the number of infections in Kenya still remains high, with close to 101,560 new infections reported annually, making Kenya the third largest HIV epidemic in sub-Saharan Africa, with an estimated 1.6 million people living with HIV.
You wouldn't judge someone for having a cold, you wouldn't judge someone for having cancer.
It can happen to you. Yes, it can happen to you.
It was 2008, it was November, and actually I wasn't prepared for it because I just went to VCT. I was taking someone for a checkup for TB screening. So because I've been with this person for quite a good time, I thought I should also get tested for TB. But with the policy of that CCC by then, even now, before getting tested for TB, you have to test for HIV first.
The HIV Stigma Index 2014 showed that HIV stigma and discrimination in Kenya is still high at 45%, with marked regional variations. HIV-related stigma and discrimination is a key barrier to accessing HIV care, treatment, and support, making it a threat to achieving the first target of ending AIDS by 2030. According to the Kenya People Living with HIV Stigma Index 2.0 report by the National Network of Empowerment for People Living with HIV in Kenya, NEFAC, of the sample population used for their survey then, men living with HIV reported higher levels of shame than women, with 31.48% for men and 27.34% for women. 71% of their male respondents reported that it was difficult to tell anyone about their HIV status, against 69% of the female respondents. This piece follows the journey of two men living with HIV, their journey to acceptance, disclosure, and finally becoming advocates for people living with HIV.
The nurse asked, do you know how to check the result? And I said yes. When you tested positive back then, you are being put in treatment immediately, but you are being given Septrin, not ARVs. So they gave me Septrin for 7 days. They opened a file for me and they did the necessary, all the necessary things that are needed to be done, like checking on weight, checking on everything, pressure, and I was left to go home.
Even after the counseling pre the second test, Morris acknowledges that acceptance was not at all easy.
It's not even then, even now. Acceptance is a process, and it's a process that requires regular counseling. And if you have, some clinics have CHVs, others doesn't have. If your clinic happens to have CHV, it will be very easy to accept because they will be visiting you, they will be encouraging you, they will empower you in one way or another, and you will join support groups, which my CC then didn't have that.
Stigma is defined as the devaluation of people living with or associated with HIV and AIDS, and this affects their emotional well-being and mental health. It comes in two forms: internalized stigma and external stigma. External stigma, which comes from friends, family, and the community, while internalized stigma is basically self-stigmatization. It was the fear of being stigmatized by his neighbors that made Were go to pick the drugs that he was not even using.
The only reason that made me to go to pick them, knowing that I won't use them, I didn't want them to follow me up to my house. Because if you default, they'll see in records that, okay, so and so has not been coming for quite a number of days, I've missed appointments. So they'll trace you to your house. By then I was living in slums. So I didn't want them to come to my house because they were they used to come, they used to walk in the slums there wearing those, with that red ribbon, and it's written, Fikiria Jamii. I just feared that because of stigma. So I was just going to my clinic, I pick my Septrin. When I reach a bridge, there was like a certain bridge there. I throw them there and I go to my house empty-handed. So I wasn't taking anything. But when I go there, if they ask me if I've been adhering, if I've been taking my drugs well, I just say yes. And lucky enough, when they do test for anything on me, they just find me I'm okay. So I did that for around 9 months, 10 months there.
Whereas case is not in isolation. Defaulting on medication is common among people experiencing internalized stigma, as is explained by Dr. Melissa Kioko, a psychologist with the Nairobi County.
I think they internalize a lot of shame and like isolation and hopelessness, and then as a result they're now reluctant to even seek help and seek treatment because you actually just feel ashamed. Because there are even cases where people refuse to go for ARVs like at places where they're known because they're just like, no, people will see, people will know I have HIV, and it's just like a lot of shame around it.
According to the National HIV Stigma and Discrimination Index summary by the National AIDS Control Council, now the National Syndemic Diseases Control Council reported that 52% of their respondents then would not buy food from the market from a person known to be living with HIV, while 48% of the respondents feared that their children would contract HIV by playing with HIV-positive children. Were, who sells mandazis in Mathare, has experienced stigma from people in the aforementioned categories, and it even affected his livelihood.
So when I went public in 2020 about my status, so the media houses came for me, and I went to Family TV first. So when I posted, my neighbors were all eager to watch or to see, because they didn't believe that, okay, someone can be positive and talk about it as if they are having just a malaria. I like babies, so I used to carry babies, these little ones. So there was a time I was carrying a certain girl, like 4 years, and then her mother came, and she took the baby from me, and she just told me in my face, wewe unataka kupatia mtoto wangu ukimwi? Unafikiria tujui uko na ukimwi? And she just went like that, and she went and she fired her housemaid.
Dr. Kioko cites ignorance on HIV transmission as a cause of this stigma.
I don't fault them because there's a lot of inaccurate media or just one-sided representation of how HIV is transmitted, right? And like you said, people think it's only gay men that can get HIV. So we're not even aware of how HIV is transmitted in the first place. So you're stigmatizing from a point of ignorance. You don't even know what you're talking about, right? So it's just like, yeah, you don't deserve to judge anyone. You wouldn't judge someone for having a cold. You wouldn't judge someone for having cancer. You wouldn't judge someone for having heart disease, right? So even just normalizing HIV goes a long way in having men access healthcare.
In 2020, as the world was battling the COVID-19 pandemic,
the UN is warning on this World AIDS Day that the fight against COVID-19 is seriously impeding global efforts of ending the disease by 2030. And those affected...
Then 23-year-old Alvin Okeyo, popularly known as Ruel Okeyo, discovered that he was HIV positive.
It was back in 2020, in September. So, I met someone, had a thing, tested in August, tests came back negative, tested in September, the test came back positive. So I realized that, this was after a long period of deciding to be celibate in some way, or abstaining other than celibate. So abstaining from any sexual activities in the year 2020. So the first time it happens in 2020, I tested positive for HIV. So it was quite a shocker, and it's not an easy journey as we make it look like, you know. I was very depressed, very devastated, indulged in drug abuse. I became so angry and bitter at everyone. I literally shut myself out from everyone and everything. So that was a really dark time, you know.
Support from his family and close friends was crucial in getting him out of the dark place he had fallen into after getting his results. But not all friends were as supportive.
There's a time I was with my friend, and he was a neighbor. So I was going to his place, and I just carried my pills because I just use them in the bottle. I don't carry them. People have various ways of carrying pills, but I do have mine in my bottle. So because I didn't have like a small bag like I do right now, just threw them in the local Huru bag. And then so when I walked out the gate, the guy's like, return those drugs. I'm like, why am I returning them? People will know about it. I'm like, how, like, of all the things people will just tend to look at, and they will just know these are HIV medications. So we really argued, and I was like, you know what, bro, in fact, I'll just stay in my house because I can't deal with this right now. I mean, kuna roiko, kuna chumvi, kuna mafuta, but you just so someone will think this is a HIV pill bottle.
Ruel also acknowledges that the journey to acceptance is not a walk in the park.
Acceptance doesn't happen immediately. It's not an on and off button. So some people will decide to take their medication when they have accepted their health status. That's where you go wrong, because at that point, it might have advanced to AIDS. And once you get to AIDS, then there's no turning back. Take your medication even if you have not accepted.
He also noted that stigma comes in many forms, and sometimes people don't even realize it when they're subjecting someone to stigma.
Stigma, again, with external has, again, different forms. So if I start on the sexual aspect of it, someone will literally not be able to engage, say, in any sexual activity with you because you're HIV positive. Because I've had instances where you're trying to become intimate with someone and the person can't be able to reciprocate something as small as a kiss just because they feel I am going to infect them with HIV. So, you know, that comes from the aspect of the sexuality bit. And when it comes to the general side of it, nowadays, stigma is not like I can't share the same cup with you or I can't share the same towel with you. No, that's past. But right now, it comes with words like, oh, I love you despite your status. I mean, so does my status have to come into the picture for you to love me, you know? So you find that people will saying it unknowingly, not understanding that that is stigma on its own.
Both men revealed their HIV status to their family first before going public about it, with Were also managing to convince his wife to get tested, and she too tested positive.
And I just got the support that they need. They were like, as long as you're taking your medication, you know, you adhering, you know, not missing appointments and all that, you're doing everything right, we'll support you fully with whatever you choose to do. And so yeah, I guess I told them before I came out.
The National Syndemic Diseases Control Council estimates that there are over 14,000 civil society entities engaged in HIV and AIDS activities in Kenya. Were claims that most of these entities are meant to cater for the youth and women, and a random search on Google confirms this.
Most of the CBOs and the CSOs I've been interacting with, they are much focused in the youth, in HIV in youths and women living in HIV.
Were Odongo, the national coordinator at the Network of Men Living with HIV and AIDS in Kenya, adds that male involvement in HIV response has not been given the priority it deserves.
I would say this without fear of contradiction, that the donor landscape has been very skeptical in terms of engaging in male interventions, to an extent that you do a good proposal targeting a particular intervention with men, and you realize that this intervention is being implemented or being led by another women organization, meaning they've not really given male involvement in HIV response the priority that it deserves.
I don't think I've seen an organization dealing with men. I don't remember interacting with one. Most of them are dealing with youths and women. I know they focus on women so much because of prevention of mother-to-child transmission.
Focusing their attention on men, their families, and how they can be brought into the conversation of HIV care, prevention and support has been one of NETMA's goals since it was started in 2007.
In terms of membership, we do not do individual membership, so you join through support groups, psychosocial support groups, post-test clubs, and associations of men. So if we were to do just a quick summary of men, I think over the many years, about 13 or so, I think we could be doing about relatively 7,000. Those are men that we can identify with and say, yeah, these ones we've reached out.
CSOs, civil society organizations, right now they're actually trying to do more for the adolescent boys and young men.
Poor framing of messages on matters HIV contributed to the stigma witnessed in the past.
If I could just jog your mind, you remember those days where you would see billboards with skeleton human being with very many bottles of medicine, and some would portray it in a manner of a drawing of a dragon. So you would look at yourself, having tested HIV positive, then you'd look at yourself and ask yourself, do I look like this dragon? So, and then if you look at that billboard again, you'd ask yourself, this is where I'm headed. As much as probably it was acceptable then, it's not acceptable now. Why? Because treatment has revolutionized HIV. If I would mention about treatment as a way of gauging whether stigma amongst men is still high or low, today we have many men accessing treatment, okay, vis-a-vis how it was then.
Men experience a lot of societal pressure, and this in turn causes a delay in them getting the help they need.
That poor health-seeking behavior actually predisposes men to, reaching the facilities when it's too late.
Well, men take so long by the time they even seek services, and not only like HIV counseling, but just like mental health care in general. Because of gender roles, societal pressure to provide and be the strong one, men take so much longer to actually seek help. And women, it's so much easier to have a chat with them, to talk about it. And even another thing that I've noted is men are more comfortable opening up to female psychologists as compared to male psychologists. And it's just very interesting because there's a lot of you just want to hide. You don't want to be open about some things because you feel like there's so much pressure for you to, look strong, I guess. Yeah.
Social media has played a huge role in Ruel and Wera's lives in terms of getting information and creating awareness.
I was like, okay, how can I be able to educate the people in a way that it's very limited, it's not expensive, it's not hectic, and the podcast came in. I've managed to create a community out of it with my podcast because right now it's listened to in over 40 countries worldwide, and I get to interact with people from different parts of the globe whereby they share their experiences, they share their challenges, some which are really, really heavy, some which you're like, this is what you can do, how you can go about it. So social media has played a role in actually getting word out there, getting information out there.
Most of the youth in urban centers are using social media more than mainstream media. If you go to TikTok, it's all over and it's youth-centered. If you go to Facebook, it's very easy to pass message through social media than if you go to these mainstream media, these media houses. So it's the easiest way to communicate with the youths, and it's the best way to keep the message for future references.
Stigma in any form is a violation of human rights, and according to the Kenya People Living with HIV Stigma Index report, of their respondents then, the proportion of men who took action against stigma was 30.66% against 22.09% of females. There are various courses of action a person living with HIV and has experienced stigma can take. One can either file a complaint, contact a network for people living with HIV, contact a government official, among other methods.
If you're still sexually active, then I don't think it would be of interest to you to really stigmatize people living with HIV, because then you do not know where you will head and where you will land. So that's my message.
No one who is HIV positive knelt down and asked God to be positive. In fact, some of us don't even know how they got it, because they were more cautious with their sex life. With HIV, you are either infected or affected.
At the end of the day, we all having feelings, not everyone has a thick skin, I normally tell people, you are one word away from killing someone. I could be thinking, I want to end everything, maybe I'm looking for a word of hope or something, and then you just say one word and you assure me why I should go and jump off that bridge. So I tell people, you are one word away from killing someone. Make sure you don't say that word.
Hi, my name is Tracy Bonareri, a reporter and fact checker at Africa Uncensored. Thank you for watching this video to this point. You are our #1 supporter and we value and appreciate you. We are proud to say that we are an independent media organization that seeks to investigate, expose, and empower. However, investigative journalism is expensive and time-consuming. Thus, to maintain our independence and be able to bring you balanced and in-depth pieces, we are asking for your financial support. Become our patron now and help fund journalism. Check the link on the description.